The Dragon's Promise by Elizabeth Lim. Chapter 41. You sent for me? My voice wobbled, and I bowed as low as I could, the way I used to when I knew I was in for a stern reprimand. The only time Father ever summoned me alone to his private chambers was when I had done something inexcusable, and riding a dragon into the middle of Jindara put all my prior mischief to shame. My imagination went wild. I braced myself to be banished, married off to an Alandan prince, or put in a cell and only fed mushy rice with bitter tea. "Are you rested?" said Father, interrupting my thoughts. From his harsh tone, I knew that wasn't an invitation to rise. "Yes, demons of Tambu, daughter," he grumbled then. "The commotion you've made in the last few hours." I'd never heard my father curse before. "I'm sorry. I know it's my fault. I shouldn't have. I want to see your arm," he said. "Your brothers told me what the demon did. That he injured you." That wasn't what I expected. I rolled up my sleeve carefully and undid my old bandage. I'd bathed since my return, but I still smelled strongly of the ointment tack and had slathered over my skin, and it prickled my nostrils. Father's jaw tensed at the gashes on my arm. It was a good thing Bander was already locked away, because he looked ready to stab the demon and chop him into bits for stew. "Your hands, too?" Father asked. "Those are old wounds." I explained of the scars on my fingers. Usually in his presence, I hid them under my sleeves, but now my hands moved while I spoke, and the scars on my fingers tingled. I'd stopped paying attention to them sometime on my journey to Ailong. They'd served as a painful reminder of the price I had paid to save my brothers. But lately, I was starting to see them in a different way, as a sign of strength and all that still must be done. "The bandages will need to be changed," Father said. There was a bucket of hot water behind him, which made me realize he'd been waiting for me. I started, but Father blocked me. "I'll do it," he said. He chuckled softly at my surprise. "I wasn't always an emperor, you know. Like your brothers, I trained to be a sentinel. My father made sure I laced and polished my own armor, scrubbed my own bowls, stitched my own wounds, same as any other soldier. Hold still, this may hurt." I bit down on my lip while he cleaned my wound, fixing my attention on the wooden window screen. Father's quarters were sparse, with a simple rosewood table, a matching shelf filled with scrolls and books, a long divan embellished with cranes and orchids, and a bronze mirror that had been in the palace since the reign of Kyoto's first emperor. After Mother died, his quarters became his private sanctuary, and guests were permitted only into the forecourt. Even my brothers and I could count on one hand the number of times we'd been invited into Father's residential apartments. Yet here I was, shedding bandages onto a woolen carpet gifted by a king of Samarin, my wound stanched by raw silk that had traveled the spice road from Alandi to Kyoto, and my flesh sewn together by an emperor of the 9 eternal courts. I couldn't help thinking how, without the armor of his ceremonial robes and his gold headdress and metalled belts, he looked simply like a father who'd stayed up too many nights worrying about his children. "Relax those shoulders, Shirori. Did you think I sent for you to punish you? It's no more than I deserve. Many would agree with you. The ministers, obviously. Likely most of the court, too. The whole of Kyoto, actually. Have you spoken to the council?" I asked carefully. My question made Father's face harden once more. It has been dissolved for the time being. A pause. While you were away, Hawar confessed that he poisoned you. Hawar confessed? That shocked me. He said his actions were justified, Father said with a dry laugh. After you seemingly attacked me in the holy mountains, he thought it safe to admit that two cultists had approached him months ago with poison. He said he had refused to even consider harming a princess of Kyoto, but when you showed signs of a magical affliction, he said he had no choice but to protect the realm. I shivered. What's happened to him? He was executed yesterday, Father replied without feeling. His accomplices have not been named, but I have faith your spectacle in Jindara will provoke a few to come forward. I said nothing. I was wondering how many in the palace secretly agreed with Hawar that I was a problem. Maybe that was why the mirror of truth had not shown me my assassin's identity, because he hadn't acted alone. Father made a grim face. There are few I trust these days. I could hear the words left unsaid. Can I trust you, daughter? I flinched. I'm sorry I lied. About going to Iro. About everything. Your lies I'm used to, said Father. But not your brother's. The rebuke made me wince, but I deserved it. I bowed even deeper. After a pause, he asked, Where did you really go? To the forgotten Isles of Lapsir, I replied. Rikema asked me to go there to fulfill her last wishes. I took Vander with me, and he is trapped there. He will never plague Kyoto again. That is welcome news, said Father. His tone betrayed nothing, and I didn't bring up how Vander had possessed him in the holy mountains. I understood my father's pride. That would be a secret that died with me. He gestured at my hair. Is this the price you paid for our deliverance? I offered a small smile. I'm not as changed as I look. Still impertinent, still not good at following instructions. I believe it. The Emperor brushed his hand over my forehead, the way he had when I was little. It'll take some getting used to, but it suits you. You always were a child of winter. His hand fell to my shoulder. No more lies. No more secrets. Can you promise me that? I took a step back. Baba, I said quietly, instead of answering, would you have protected all the bloodsakes the way you've protected me, or do you only care because I'm your daughter? The question took him by surprise. He inhaled. If I am honest, usually by the time word of the bloodsakes reaches the Emperor, they are dead. Perhaps that was why I'd been chosen this time. Because unlike the others born before me, I had the Emperor's ear. I had a voice. I had to use it. I will be honest too, I said. I'm going back to the breach. I want to speak with the demons. Have you lost your senses? Father's eyes constricted. You are not permitted anywhere near that evil place. A law you knew well the first time you broke it. Break it again, and I will have no choice but to punish you. Had I stayed put, Vander would still be in Kyoto, I argued. Let me deal with the rest of the demons. Demons killed your stepmother. I will not have them kill you too. The circles under Father's eyes deepened, and I noticed for the first time how much he had aged in the past year. If you have children one day, you will understand. When you and your brothers disappeared, I would have given anything, my crown, my kingdom, my life, to have you all safe. A lump hardened in my throat, and I did something I'd never dared to do even when I was a little girl. I reached for Father's hand, clasping it tightly. "I can make us safe again," I wanted to assure him. "I can stop the demons." But those words wouldn't come. Because no matter what I did, things could never go back to the way they were. The home I'd yearned for when I was under Raikama's curse was gone, and all I could do was build a new one. Somehow, "Kiata is my home," I said instead. "Let me fight for it." Father's eyes were mirrors of my own, reflecting the same stubbornness and resolve. "I'm not a fool, daughter. I understand what happened to Hasho." His fists clenched, and it took a long breath for him to regain his composure. "You could suffer far worse. Even if that is so, I am not afraid. This is what I was born to do. For so long, I've ignored my role as a princess, a daughter of Kiata. Let me do my duty now." Father's hands dropped to his sides. He knew I was using his old words against him. "I miss the days when you hid from your tutors in the trees. I didn't worry half as much about you then as I do now." My mouth quirked into a knowing smile. "You won't keep me from the mountains?" "I want to," he said thinly. "But I know you, Shirori, and I know you have your brothers behind you. Young Lord Bushian, too. You've already sneaked out once before. You'd do it again without question. So better I equip you all with what you need than have you confront these demons unprepared." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. Then my brow furrowed as I thought hard. Are the priestesses captured from the mountains still alive? One is, barely. I almost pitied the woman. "Could you arrange an audience?" I asked. I wished to speak to her. The priestess Janinha was a specter of the smug old woman I'd encountered in the mountains. Patches of blood crusted her cheeks, and her hair hung about her in straw-like clumps, marbled with dirt and mud. Without her wooden staff, she looked too weak to do harm, but I wasn't fooled. Not when her eyes cut into me like two scythes, freshly sharpened and devoid of remorse. "Are you sure I can't come too?" Kiki had asked. I didn't get to peck Hawar's eyes out. "At least let me have it this priestesses." I almost wished I'd relented. But it was best if I spoke with the priestess alone. The guards dragged her into the room and thrust her upon a black cotton sheet laid on the chamber's floor, placed there to protect the parquetry from her blood. There were no windows, but lantern light illuminated the welts and lashes on her sallow cheeks. Yet beneath her hard gaze, I somehow felt like I was the prisoner. "My father has sentenced you to death by 1,000 cuts," I said coldly. "Answer my questions truthfully, and I will see to it that you are granted a merciful fate." "I've been waiting to see you, Shiorianma," rasped Janinha, completely ignoring my offer. "What is it you wish to know?" I wouldn't let her dark eyes chill me. I said, "You possess knowledge about bloodsakes. Have the ones before me always been able to hear the demons?" A whistle leaked from the gaps between the priestess's teeth. It took me a while to realize she was laughing. "Do not speak as if you can fight your fate," she replied. "Princess or not, you are prey, Shiorianma. Either you die for us or you die for them." "Answer the question," I said harshly. "Yes, all bloodsakes are drawn to the mountains. Do you think you are the first to spill blood for the demons?" "Wasn't I?" My lips twitched with curiosity. She had my attention. "The last time was 40 years ago. The blood sake before you was a silly girl who had no idea what she was until it was too late. When the demons lured her to them, she thought they were the gods speaking to her, promising her wealth and power and beauty. She gave her blood to them, creating a breach, a much smaller one than yours, but all the same, we let her do it. People were beginning to forget the wickedness of demons, and nothing prods the memory like a bit of blood. We lit her entire village on fire while she was sleeping. We told her it was the demons she had freed, and unlike you, she knew she had to atone. The priestess's face glowed. We were only too happy to help. You monsters, I whispered. With her ashes, we sealed the mountains before a single demon could escape. The priestess dipped her head. Such we can do again with you, Shiorianma. I ground my teeth. You murdered an innocent girl, an entire village, and framed the demons for your own sins. If not for what we did, many more would have perished, Janinha said, cutting me off. My order understands that sacrifice is necessary. We are willing to die for the good of Kiata. Are you? The good of Kiata, I said. What would you know of that? The guards wrenched her off her knees to take her away, but she reached into the back of her mouth and made a sharp twist. Out came a blackened tooth, covered in blood and rot. She crushed it between her fingers. My heart gave a lurch as it crumbled in her palm, like dark sand. Stop, I shouted. The guards unsheathed their swords, but the priestess tossed the ashes high, and their blades froze mid-swing, the edges clinking against her chains. No need to get up, princess, she croaked as I sprang. I am nearly finished. One by one, the bronze lanterns nodding along the walls went cold. And as darkness wreathed the chamber, she spoke her last words. If you will not enter the fire, then, come the dawn, Kiata will burn in your place. Only your ashes will save us. With that, the guards were released. A second before their swords sank into her flesh, the priestess fell dead. Chapter 42. Maybe she was bluffing, said Reiji when I reported what had happened. It wouldn't be the first time the priestesses tried to deceive you. She cast an enchantment, I insisted. There was power to her words, like when Raikama cursed us. She gave her life for it. You think it's a curse? Benkai asked. I nodded. Benkai believed me. Her order has recruited many followers since Cromwelin's sighting yesterday, he said. They blame any destruction on the demons, so it's likely that whatever malice they have planned will start near the breach. I'll ride out and warn my men. We'll search the area and evacuate the nearby villages. Be careful, I warned him. They still have ashes from the last bloodsakes. Ashes that gave them magic, enough that I worried Janinha's promise to make Kiata burn would come true. Noted, sister. Wande leaned forward, setting down the paper he'd been folding into a fan. If it really is a curse, then finding the other cultists won't prevent the inevitable. What can we do if Kiata does catch fire like she warned? I hesitated, nervous to speak what was on my mind. Magic is what fuels her curse, so only magic can stop it. But how? Asked Wande. I turned to Benkai. When you are at war, who do you seek to be your ally? The enemy of my enemy, he replied easily. Exactly, I said. The priestess's enemies are the demons. I've I've been thinking I should talk to them. I expected my brothers to disagree, to argue with me and tell me it was a dangerous idea. My expectations were met. All 6 of them began talking at once, but I could hardly hear what they were saying, for they weren't the loudest voices in my head. That belonged to my bird. What are you possibly going to say to them? Kiki trilled. I'm sorry, but would you mind slaying all of my enemies for me? As a thank you, I'll bring you cakes for the next 1,000 years while you remain imprisoned in the mountains. Oh, and please stop making the earthquake whenever you feel angry about being locked up. It's frightening the villagers and waking them up in the middle of the night. It did sound ludicrous when she put it that way, but still. What will you say to them? Hasho echoed Kiki's question. Honestly, I don't know, I admitted. I thought I'd have more time to think about it. Wande swatted his fan at a fly buzzing over Jotun. According to the priestesses, you have 1 day. If you insist on this course of action, I'd say you better get thinking. I went for a walk to clear my mind. Autumn had arrived overnight, yellow crowns staining the trees and frosty dew clinging to the eaves of the cloud pavilion. Taken was supposed to be waiting for me, but I heard him laughing with 2 children beside the carp pond. Both hung at his sides, pulling his arms and speaking so quickly I could only catch the words princess and story. When they saw me, they jolted. Their eyes went first to my hair, loose and unpinned and entirely silvery white, then to Kiki, who sat on my shoulder, her paper wings beating as vivaciously as a real bird's. They waved shyly before remembering to bow. I waved back, smiling cautiously until they started to giggle. For what reason I couldn't possibly fathom. That's Princess Shirori, isn't it? The girl whispered to Takan. Where's the bowl on her head? He'd told them about the bowl? No wonder she was staring. Will you tell Suli and Sinu what happened to the bowl? Takan asked me. It broke, I said bluntly. I wasn't good at stories. When she found a way to end the curse, Takan said, picking up from my words, the bowl shattered into 100 pieces, saving Shiorion Ma from a horrible, wicked fire. I'm glad, said the boy, clapping his hands. But why's her hair white? From chasing ghosts, I replied, and battling demons. I bared my teeth and made a monster face. The children laughed. Then they chased gleefully after Kiki, not bothered at all that she was a magical flying paper bird, and I beckoned Takan to the footbridge. Sinu and Suli, I mused, gesturing at the pair. Friends of yours. Good friends, replied Takan. Their father, Mr. Liu, is the head messenger. Takan had known the gardener's name too. Do you know everyone in the palace? A shrug. I've become acquainted with some of the staff. They've been kind. Unlike your fellow lords and ladies, from his silence I could already guess. Jindara's court was full of sycophants and status seekers, and I imagined it hadn't been overly welcoming to my rustic, northern-bred betrothed. Not even my brothers would have done what Takan had done for me last winter. He'd opened his home to me when he'd thought me a humble tavern cook and had treated me no differently than a high-born lady. For a lord, even of the 3rd rank, he was hopelessly guileless and unassuming. The court must have devoured him whole and spat him out. Don't worry, I admitted. I think they're intolerable too. Why do you suppose my best friend is a paper bird? And all the cooks on Chireo Street? Tacken teased. Exactly. I leaned over the bridge, watching Suli's braids bounce across her shoulders as she chased Kiki around the pavilion. From the back, she looked like Tacken's younger sister. You must miss Megari, I said. You haven't seen her in over half a year. We exchange letters often. That's how I got to know Suli and Sanu. They take my letters to their father in exchange for stories. What kind of stories? I probed. I want stories too. Most were about you. Oh! I missed you when you were in AI Long, Tacken said. Telling stories about you helped. I swallowed, unable to tamp down the warmth ballooning in my chest. I'm still angry with myself for losing the sketchbook you gave me, I confessed. But I'll never lose your letters. I've memorized half of them already. I've been rereading them every night to help me sleep. You bruise me, Shirori, said Tacken Riley. They're that dull. Grinning, I mimicked a young Tacken. My sister found a centipede in the granary this morning and, thinking it was a sweet and harmless caterpillar, brought it to lunch. My ears are still ringing from how loudly Mother screeched. Tacken's palm went up to his face. He looked like he wished he could jump into the pond. Did I write that? You did. My grin turned wicked. I loved seeing him uncomfortable, then chasing that discomfort away in the next breath. I scooted closer until our arms overlapped on the wooden railing. Your letters are a treasure. When I read them, I feel a little less lost. I feel like I'm where I belong. I stared into the water, watching orange and black spotted carp nibble the supports of the bridge. Your heart is your home, I murmured. Until you understand that, you belong nowhere. You said that to the pearl when we were on Lapser, Tacken remembered. So I had. I'd been so desperate to get the pearl to listen to me, I'd forgotten that the words came first from Alang. A message from one half-dragon to another. I hoped Alang would find his home one day. I'm still not sure I understand what it means for me, I confessed. A shadow came over Tacken's eyes, and I could tell that his thoughts had returned to our present conundrum. He turned to face me. What can I do to help? The simple question, so unbidden and so earnest, made me look up from the water. I don't know what to do about the demons, I admitted. If I keep them trapped, magic stays trapped too. But if I free them, I unleash chaos upon Kiata. What do you think you should do? Tacken tipped my chin up. I know you, Shirori. You think there's another way. Tell me. I inhaled a shaky breath and gathered my courage. I can't forget the way Cromwell spoke about them. He felt sorry for them. It makes me wonder whether I can reason with them. Maybe even ask for help. Tacken blinked in surprise. Well, they can't be any less agreeable than the priestesses. That got the slightest smile out of me. True. I loosened the comb from my hair. I hadn't brought Tacken's gift to Lapser for fear that I'd lose it, the way I'd lost his sketchbook, and I held it now, admiring the cranes, the rabbit, the moon painted on its spine. I never asked, did you paint this? Yes, answered Tacken, clearing his throat. It was Megari's idea to include the rabbit. She said it'd bring luck, and the cranes would watch over you. He paused. She's been folding them like you taught her. She begs for you to come home and enchant them to life. Apparently, Pao has been giving her grief about sneaking out of the fortress, and she could use an army of paper birds on her side. An army of paper birds on her side. My eyes went round, and I straightened, unable to contain the excitement suddenly bubbling in my chest. Takan, I think that's it. I clutched his hands, buzzing now. What is? Takan asked. Can you get me 1,000 sheets of paper? I said. Send another letter to Megari too. Tell her she's a genius. We're going to fold paper birds, I announced to the small group that had gathered in my chamber. Takan, my brothers, and Chinia sat in a semicircle on the floor, stacks of paper laid out before each of them. 1,000 paper birds, to be precise. Chinia peeled a page from her stack. What are you going to do with all of these birds? She asked. Make a wish? She was referring to a legend we all knew. To honor Amurian and her cranes, the gods were said to grant a wish to anyone who sent 1,000 birds to heaven. I'd spent an entire winter folding paper cranes, hoping to gain the gods' ears and break my brother's curse. But the gods had been silent for centuries. I no longer trusted them to listen. No wish, I replied. The birds will serve as my army against the priestesses and the demons if needed. From Benkai's and Reiji's frowns, their skepticism was clear. An army of paper birds? Yes, my army. I'd need magic to counteract the curse upon Kiata. The tears of Amurian were near the breach. I'd draw upon their power if my own magic wasn't enough, and the birds would help me spread it. Trust me, I said before going on to explain the plan. Over the afternoon, I taught them the proper method for folding paper cranes. Wande caught on the quickest, and then he started experimenting with the folds and made paper swallows and doves and eagles, even a phoenix. He taught the variations to Jotun and Reiji, who decided they were too complicated and stuck to making cranes. Meanwhile, Benkai and Hai and Taken were furiously competing to see who could fold 100 birds first. Chinia folded the smallest ones I'd ever seen. A dozen fit easily on her palm. You'll need soldiers of all sizes, she explained. In the corner, Hasho sat with a spool of black thread, nodding eyes that Chinia would later sew onto the birds. So they might see, he explained when he caught me looking. Like Kiki. My paper bird beamed at him. All day she had flitted to and from his side, and it warmed me to see how close they had become. Together we worked, and by evening we had 1,000 birds. 1,001, Kiki reminded me. Don't forget, I'm the first. How could I forget? You'd never let me. True enough. She pinched me by my hair, dragging me to the nearest window. Look at all the stars. See the 7-pointed crane? I've been spreading rumors about it. What sort of rumors? I said narrowly. That constellation is Amurian's sacred crane. Not anymore. Now it's you and your brothers. You've 1 star each. I'm only making sure you're remembered, Kiki interrupted. If you are, I will be too. Looking after your own interests as always, I see. I expected Kiki to harumph, but she took on a serious tone I'd never heard before. I don't want to be forgotten, she admitted. I don't even know what it's like to be a real bird. Her earnestness caught me off guard. I thought you didn't want to be like other birds, I said mildly. Feathers molting, having to feel hot and cold, eating worms. A bird can change her mind. Not about the worms, though. Kiki, you should go back inside. Be with your family. Kiki waved her beak toward my family, and Hai opening a wine gourd to celebrate. Jotun playing familiar tunes from our childhood on the flute. Reiji and Benkai loudly complaining how sloppy their cranes looked compared to Taken's. Keep a lantern on for me, she said. Before I could reply, she dove out the window. With a smile perched on my lips, I set a lantern by the window and counted the 7 stars of the sacred crane. Maybe it was my imagination, but tonight they seemed to burn brighter than all the stars in the entire sky. Chapter 43. I smelled the fires at dawn. The air had gone thick, and I woke up coughing and kicking off my blankets. Seconds later, the palace bells clanged, and the war drums soon followed. I hurried to the window, and my chest constricted as I searched the horizon. It was the darkest dawn I'd ever seen. The sun was pale enough that I could stare at it without blinking. Clouds splattered the horizon like dark ink. I didn't have a view of the holy mountains, but the billowing smoke guided my eyes to a flare of unnatural red light. The forests were burning, and not with any ordinary fire. The flames were a garish red, as black at their core as a starless night. It was a blaze I knew all too well, one that could not easily be quenched except by magic. Demon fire. If you will not enter the fire, then Kiata will burn in your place, the priestess had warned me. And so it had begun. If I didn't help, the demon fire would spread. It would destroy everything. Tell Takkin to meet me in Raikama's garden, I instructed Kiki, stuffing her beak with a hastily written message. My brothers, too. Quickly, I dressed in record time. Lacing the leather armor Hasho had lent me over my chest and pulling on a helmet. Then I scooped up the knapsack filled with paper birds and slid the mirror of truth inside. On my way out, I rapped loudly on my brother's doors. Miracles of Ashmi Yuen, they all answered, ready to go. It's a trap, said Andhai, speaking what was on everyone's mind. The priestesses want to draw you out. One lick of the fire and you'll turn to ashes, Jotun agreed. We agreed on this yesterday, I said. Nothing changes just because it's demon fire. I have to go. You waste time by bickering. Chinia appeared in the hall, one hand protecting her belly, which was just starting to show. Let her go. You should be resting, I said, his voice softening from firm to tender. If I weren't with child, I'd come with you, Chinia said to me, ignoring her husband. One of the tiny paper birds she'd folded had fallen out of my knapsack, and she tucked it back inside. May you have the luck of the dragons today, my sister. Come back to us safely. I hugged her, and then off I went before anyone else could argue. Taken arrived at Raikama's garden at the same time as me. Like my brothers, he was sheathed in his sentinel's armor, but only the sight of Taken made my stomach flutter. He'd tied his dark hair back, and I took in everything about his face. The rounded outline of his ears, the sharp slope of his cheekbones, his chiseled jaw. 2 of the gold-spun cords knotted over his shoulders were tangled, and I combed them with my fingers, trying not to blush as my gaze fell to the steel plates over his chest. Good morning. He gifted me with my favorite smile, a beat before tossing me a rice dumpling. Breakfast, he said, throwing one to each of my brothers, too. They're from yesterday, so they might be a touch stale, but I figured we'd need our strength. Shirori, especially. I don't understand how we'll meet up with Benkai, Reiji said. We should be gathering our mounts and joining the rest of the soldiers on the way to the mountains. You'll be glad you didn't bring your horse, Takken replied, exchanging a look with me. The stairs are narrow. Stairs. Wande's brows knit with confusion. I don't see stairs. I trusted you when you said you had everything planned out, said Andhai, but you forget our stepmother was a sorceress, I interrupted. A very powerful and capable sorceress. Are we ready? As Takan and my brothers murmured their assent, Hasha went to the pond. He had also thought ahead, and he dipped a sheaf of handkerchiefs into the water. For the smoke, he said, handing each of us a damp cloth. He sat again by the pool. A trio of larks had settled on his shoulder, and he let out a low whistle as he stroked their feathers with his wing. He could feel Raikama's magic, just as I could. I folded the handkerchief into my pocket and took one last bite of my rice dumpling. Then I gestured my brothers to the pool. Watch. Holding up Raikama's ball of red thread, I cried, Take me to the tears of Amirian. At my command, the pond's water rushed apart, revealing a stairway just wide enough for one person to descend at a time. Jotun exhaled with amazement. Raikama had this in her garden the entire time? Saves us hours of trotting along the countryside, said Kiki, stretching her beak in a yawn. Hasho, the only other person who could understand her, laughed. Benkai's going to be upset he's wasted all these mornings riding back and forth to the mountains. I led everyone down the passageway until a light shone through at the end. In fewer than 100 steps, we had traveled a morning's journey out of the palace. The instant we emerged into the forest, a wave of heat seared my face. Smoke stung my eyes and entered my lungs, making them pinch painfully. I held the cloth up to my face and tied it in place so I could breathe. It was impossible to tell where the fires had originated, but they'd already claimed this part of the forest. What had once been a rich wood of cypress and pine trees was now a smoldering wasteland. Embers sizzled in the dirt beneath my feet as I hurried after Raikama's ball of thread, and it wasn't just the smoke that made my eyes water. It was sorrow, too. Beyond the next hill, a battle raged. Swords clanged, spears clashed. Men and women shouted. Their cries grew louder the closer we came. I only prayed that Benkai was winning, that he could keep the priests and priestesses distracted long enough for me to find the tears of Amirian. They hadn't seen me yet, but I knew that wouldn't last long. I had to be quick. Here it is, Shirori. Kiki cried when the red thread came to a halt. It's here. I held in a gasp. All that remained of the tears of Amirian was a shriveled mud pit. A single moon orchid lay upon the cracked earth, its pink petals singed. A great treasure of Kyoto, the last source of magic that outlasted the gods, was gone. There was still a tickle in the air as I approached the pit, and when I crouched at the rim, its residual power raised goosebumps on my skin. Yet these were only scraps of magic. Threads of a tapestry that had been ripped to shreds. Would it be enough? Anger throbbed in my temples, or maybe that was the smoke, my panic, my fear. I'd been hoping to draw on the magic from the pool for strength, but now it seemed I had only myself. I gathered Rikama's thread upon my lap, and my hands curled into fists as I noticed the heaps of dry wood beside the pit. If the priests and priestesses of the holy mountains thought they'd make this sacred place a pyre, they were wrong. Keep your guard up, I warned my companions. They're near. It was time to work. I ripped open my knapsack to free the paper birds. Awaken, I whispered, imbuing my words with power. The birds twitched with life. Fly. That was as far as I got. An arrow flew past, so close that my ears rang. Takken pushed me to the ground, and no sooner had we ducked than more arrows flew. One clipped Hasho's wing. Another pierced Jotun's thigh. With high-pitched cries, our enemies vaulted down from the smoldering trees, and reinforcements charged from behind. Dressed head to toe in white, they wove in and out of the smoke like ghosts. Fight! I ordered my birds. With a whoosh, they dispersed. Feeding off my own anger and panic, they were vicious. Beaks speared into fleshy white eyeballs, razor-thin wings sliced into cheeks and fingers. Real birds came too, diving down from the sky in a show of solidarity. Hiki let out a cackle every time she drew blood. Soon Benkai and his soldiers found us. Sweat matted my brother's temples, and every inch of his armor was scorched. About time, Andhai greeted our brother. Why so grim? You could fight these zealots in your sleep. I couldn't tell whether Andahai was being sarcastic. Neither, apparently, could Benkai. It's much more than a few, brother, Benkai replied. Soon I knew what he meant. From behind the mountains poured hundreds of new soldiers, perhaps thousands. The priests and priestesses had raised their own army of villagers, fishermen, mercenaries, even nobles, and a handful of treacherous sentinels. Their cheeks were smeared with ashes, which allowed them to pass through the waves of demon fire springing from the earth. Protect Shirori, Benkai commanded before disappearing into the fray with a primal yell. The demon fire crackled, racing through the scorched trees toward me. While Takan and my brothers shielded me from incoming attacks, I focused on the demon fire. I had to stop it. With a slow exhale, I unraveled my magic, channeling its threads toward the fires. The threads knotted around each fire in turn, squeezing out its life. But for every blaze I extinguished, a new one was born. I couldn't do this alone. As if in response, there came a rumble from the mountains. I rocked back on my heels. The demon fire too shuddered, and then it roared back up, higher and fiercer than ever. I looked up. With the trees gone leafless, I had a clear view of the holy mountains. Shirori, the demons murmured through the wind. Let us free. Could they help me? Would they help me? The wind whistled against the dagger on my hip. All I needed to do was offer a taste of my blood, and they would come. One quick gash across my arm would do the trick. But I couldn't find the courage. My hesitation cost me. Demon fire sprang in every direction, flames flaring higher than the trees. It came at me without mercy, swelling and roaring like some monstrous beast. No matter where I ran, it followed, destroying everything and everyone in its path. And I had been right. It was a trap. The demon fire wouldn't rest until it had me. With every bit of strength I possessed, I let go of Taken's hand and shoved him away from me. My betrothed was strong and steady, but I'd caught him by surprise. He stumbled back, out of the demon fire's range. A wall of flame shot up, separating us. Fire looped around me, trapping me inside and keeping Takan and my brothers out. As long as I lived, I would never forget the anguish in Takan's eyes as he stood on the other side of the fire. His gaze passed over me and ran along the width and height of the flames, as if gauging them for some way through. There isn't one, I thought. Takan, you mad fool, get out of here. Priests and priestesses emerged from behind the smoke, charging for the wall of demon fire. For me, Takan's arrows went wild, and my brothers raised their bows to join him. Bodies fell, forward, backward on their sides, blue-feathered arrows protruding from their backs. But our enemies were too many, and as soon as the cultists passed the wall, slipping through as if it were made of water, not fire, no knife or arrow could follow. My birds and I attacked valiantly together as they advanced. I scored a gash across the abdomen of a priest, stabbed a priestess's collarbone, narrowly missed another's heart. But we were only delaying the inevitable. From behind, someone grabbed my wrist and wrenched my dagger out of my grasp. A priestess swung her spear at my back, and my bones made a horrible cracking sound as I slammed forward onto my stomach. A barrage of kicks came at my ribs, and my chin banged against the hard-packed dirt, my mouth so full of filth I couldn't even squeak in pain. "Where's your magic now, blood sake?" They jeered as my concentration broke and the paper birds fell lifeless at my sides. "This is for Gia." A kick to my back. For Janinha. For Kiata. Pain came in an explosion of white, and my entire world went blank before snapping back into strident color. I bit down on my lip, tasting blood. They goaded me to scream, to curse or cry out. But I didn't make a sound. These zealots couldn't kill me. Not by beating me to death, anyway. The only acceptable way for me to die was by demon fire, so they could collect my precious ashes. "So full of spirit, Shiorianma," said a priestess, holding up her spear to catch her breath. "In another life, perhaps you might have joined us." I wasn't listening. My lips were clamped together, and one of the tiny paper birds Chinia had folded blew past my cheek. "Awaken," I called out to it. "Help me." As its wings fluttered, I called out to the rest of the tiny birds. They were the size of spiders, and Chinia had been right. I did need soldiers of all sizes. Soldiers small enough to fly unnoticed. Kiki would say I was out of my mind, and maybe I was. But I was no longer afraid. "I've changed my mind," I told the tiny birds. "Tell the mountains I've changed my mind." My paper birds flew over the demon fire, out of my assailant's reach, as small as the sparks spitting forth from the flames. Before anyone noticed they were there, they flew off. My beating was done, and now two of the cultists were dragging me to the tears of Amirian. Soon twigs snapped against my broken bones, and someone propped me against a sword staked into the pit. I was so weak I immediately slid and toppled onto my side. No one helped me up. The priests and priestesses chanted over me. They spoke in Old Khitan, praying that my ashes would announce the birth of a new era, that the demons would never be free. None of it was novel to me, and I tuned out their sanctimonious words, listening instead to the earth below me. It was still, silent. Hurry, I thought to my birds. Please. Heat scorched my back, and the flames crackled as I pressed my cheek to the dirt. I was in so much pain I couldn't move. But I held on. I couldn't let go of the thread that tied me to the paper birds. Not before they delivered my message. Finally, the ground trembled. Harder than before. And this time, it didn't stop. A few of the priestesses stumbled. Their chants faltered. As they regained their balance, they tossed fistfuls of ashes into the air and resumed chanting, faster. The demon fire grew higher, hotter. It rose from the earth in a tall wall, and as it closed in on me, my sweat simmered. Wood dissolved into ash under my ankles, and the flames crackled against my flesh. I had seconds at best. It took all my willpower not to panic, to hold in my screams and breathe as the demon fire leapt to devour me. Shirori, cried a voice from above. Shirori! I was so delirious that at first I thought it was the demons. I tipped my head back and squinted through the smoke. Takan and Hasho. They were in the sky, riding astride the backs of eagles and swans and a whole motley of birds I couldn't see, with Kiki. They hung above me, a gasp above the towering flames. Takan's bow was in his hands, aimed downward. I heard the stretch and twing of a string. 3 whooshas, one after another. Through the flames, I didn't even see the arrows fly. One by one, the priests and priestesses fell. Knees sank in the mud, and fingers curled into the earth. The ones who lived kept chanting even as they tumbled forward. The demon fire roared. The window above me closed, the black hearts of the flames writhing around to devour me. But the seconds that Takan and Hasho bought were enough. The air turned cold first. Then a dark veil was cast over the sun, choking out its sickly light. Shadows swept over the earth. All around me, the flames shrank into embers, and the forest went dark. Only the breach glowed. Its fervent red light pulsed brighter and fanned across the forest, searching. When at last it fell upon me, the ground gave a tumultuous shudder. The demons were here. Chapter 44. Demons tore through the breach and swarmed the forest. Radiating scarlet light, they were nightmares incarnate, stitched of man, beast, and monster. The more human-like ones were attired in pale, ghostly armor, while others wore only the hides of beasts, fur, feathers, or scales. Red-eyed monsters descended upon the priests and priestesses, ending their lives before they even had a chance to scream. A flash of fangs, a hiss of smoke. Then, like a flame, they were snuffed out. All that was left was their white robes. As the wind swept away their remains, Takan rushed to my side. I could only imagine how I appeared, wilted and broken like that last moon orchid in the tears of a Murian. Ever so tenderly, he lifted me onto his lap. "You're going to be all right," he said, holding my fingers. "Don't lie. You're not good at it." "It really isn't so bad, sister," Hasho chimed in, an even worse liar than Takan. I wished I could tell him so, but pain spasmed through every point in my body, and I bit down on my lip. Hasho's smile disappeared, and Takken gritted his teeth like a man intent on cracking a tooth. He brushed the hair from my eyes, his fingertips gliding over my temples. "Don't let go, Shirori," he said. "Fight." I was fighting and losing. I could hardly feel the welts on my back or the broken ribs on my side. My body was going cold. Takken must have noticed me shivering, for he pressed his body to mine and murmured something to Hasho, who immediately threw me his cloak and started rubbing my fingers. But it was no use. I could feel the life ebbing out of me. I was dying. I didn't even notice the demons arrive until Takken lifted his head and Hasho reached for his short sword. A soft red light bathed them, accentuating their starved and hollow eyes. I prayed that I hadn't made a horrible mistake. They didn't attack as they had when Bander dragged me into the holy mountains. They were strangely hesitant. "Come with us," they said, their voices reverberating in the hollows of my ears. "We have many more waiting to be freed." "No," Takken said. "You cannot have her." The demons ignored him and extended their light to me. I began to float, and Takken grabbed my hand, refusing to give me up. Hasho came too, blocking us with his body and swinging his short sword. The demons snarled. "Stop," I rasped. "I'll go with you, but you aren't to harm them." One of the demons stepped forward. As his shadow fell over me, my pain became a dull ache. My wounds were still there, but the hurt was gone. My eyes flew up in confusion. "There is no need for you to feel pain," the demon said. His voice was neither kind nor cruel, merely firm. "Come now. We will not harm your company." "Let me go," I whispered to Takken, twisting my hand away. His eyes were glassy with pain. He held on. "No." I touched my nose to his cheek, my eyes tracing the peak of his hairline to the dimple in his chin. Then I pressed my forehead to his and, our hands still entwined, reached into my pocket for Raikuma's thread. It was little more than a tangled clump at this point, but there was still magic in it. It shimmered in my hands, warm with light. I kissed Takken wordlessly before I pushed the thread into his hands. The demons seized me. "We have her," they shouted. "Return! Return!" We shot up into the clouds, and all I could see was Takken cutting through the trees, tracking the slip of my form among the fathomless mass of demons. I kept my eyes on him as long as I could. He shouldered his way forward, swift and relentless, his every muscle focused on the singular goal of finding me. Nothing would stop him, not the flying trees uprooted by the trembling earth, not the violent winds or the sudden fractures in the ground. "Shirori," he kept shouting. "Shirori!" "Takken," I whispered. An ache rose to my heart, and I pulled my gaze away. Another voice was calling my name. A little voice that my ears picked up immediately. "Kiki." She led a wave of paper birds toward the breach. "Shirori, you'd better not forget me." "I'm coming." So she was. With the barest of smiles, I closed my eyes and let the darkness consume me. Chapter 45. I awoke in the underbelly of the holy mountains. Entrapped in cavernous walls, I lay on an unyielding bed of stone not far from the breach. The breach was rife with magic, and it had grown in the last few days, stretching crookedly across the slope of the mountain in a thick vein. Even from within, it glowed. With tremendous effort, I propped myself up onto my elbows. Something rustled against the rocks, and I held my breath. Kiki. I cried weakly as dozens of my paper birds surrounded me. You're here. Kiki's wing was broken, pierced by an arrow, and she craned her long neck at the paper birds shuffling behind her, hiding behind the rocks. We couldn't let you come alone. I touched her wing, trying to mend it. My thumb brushed against the silvery gold pattern of feathers, so faint I rarely noticed it. After all these months, I finally understood what it was. The piece of my soul that connected us. Don't bother, said my bird, pulling her wing away. We're not getting out of here. Ever the pessimist, aren't you? It was the first time the paper bird's eyes betrayed her. They were soft and wet, the ink smearing. Almost as if she were crying. It hurt to swallow, and I slowly, wretchedly rose to my knees. Look, I whispered, I'm getting better. Liar. A liar I was, for I was still dying. Our souls were linked. She would feel it. The mountain's quieter than last time, I remarked, tilting my head at our surroundings. No illusions of home or Raikama's garden deceived my eyes. No demons disguised as my brothers beckoned to me. All was still, empty, almost peaceful. Where are the demons? My answer came as soon as I asked. Smoke pierced the breach, hissing into every corner. As my paper birds rose into a protective cocoon, the demons materialized. They cornered me against a wall. Hundreds of red eyes bored through the shadows, watching me with the greatest intent, as curious as they were desperate. You have asked to return. Now fulfill your promise. Kiki hopped back behind my hair. You're not really going to free them, are you? She whispered. Just give the word and we'll attack. We can seal the mountains. I said nothing, but dread rolled in my gut. I'd told the demons I'd changed my mind. I'd summoned them to get me, and so they had. Now they were waiting for me, and every second they waited, their anger rose. It heated the mountains, made the earth tremble. If you have a plan, now would be a good time to implement it, squeaked Kiki. I scrabbled for a loose rock and pressed its sharp edge into my palm. I am going to free them, I said finally. What? Kiki's inky black eyes bulged. Have you gone senseless? You can't free the demons. They can't be locked up here forever, I said. Maybe my ancestors thought so, but it has to end. They'll kill you, Shirori, Kiki pleaded. And me. I'll make them promise, I said, more certain than ever. Immortals are bound to their promises. That didn't work so well with Vander. It'll work this time. I slashed my hand, holding in a cry as blood welled over the lines of my palm, and I summoned my shield of paper birds close. I came here of my own will, I said, my voice hardly more than a whisper. And I am ready to give you my blood. I will free you, but in return you will do something for me. The demons stilled, their red eyes aglow against the cave's dark. As my blood trickled down my arm, the droplets landed on my paper birds, painting their heads crimson. Speak. I will give you my blood, I repeated, in exchange for your oath that you shall not harm any living being in Kyoto. Accept my terms, and you will be free once more. Magic will be free once more. The demons murmured sounds of dissent. A demon's nature is destruction. We are servants of chaos, and we will not be bound by any oath. They scratched their nails against the walls, and the shrill cacophony set my ears ringing. Your life is not yours to give, blood sake. It belongs to us. Then we shall see who is faster. The demons lunged with supernatural speed. In no universe could I have defeated them fairly. But I'd cheated. I'd known the demons would never accept my bargain. I was helpless, defenseless, with only an army of paper birds. But what they hadn't noticed was that I'd been gathering the strands of my soul and cutting them free. Lady Salzea had told me once that she believed that the human soul was made up of countless little strings that tethered it to life. That those strings could be cut one by one. I was counting on her to be right. Before this moment, I'd always understood that my blood would break the demons' chains and free them from the mountains. But I had never understood the point of my other gift as a blood sake, why I could lend away fragments of my soul to create new life. I'd inspirited plenty of things during the last year, yet only once had I given part of myself away for good, when I'd created Kiki. Of all my enchantments, only she had lasted and stayed by my side and shared my thoughts. I used to think it was because I had smeared my blood on her crown, but I was wrong. It was her wings, the thread of my soul forming a pattern of silver and gold for all to see. Such strands burst now from my hair, from my fingertips, from every pinpoint of my being. They hummed like zither strings, and in my mind I swept across the span of them, inspiriting the paper birds at my feet. Live, I urged them. My magic worked quickly. Their hearts came alive, beating in sync with mine. With each one that rose, I fell a little, but I didn't stop until I had no more to give. Only then did I collapse. The demons came upon me, teeth grazing my skin and claws piercing my flesh. I felt no pain. My head and body felt light as if I were floating. Flying, like my birds as they split away and glided past the breach, laying their wings upon its scarlet maw and sealing it until only one speck of rock was left uncovered. I smiled and lifted my hand. One last filament of soul dangled from my wrist, and it was the only thread tethering me to life. It would take only a thought for me to send it away and stitch the breach shut once more, but once I did that, I would cease to be. The demons froze, their gnashing teeth and claws going still as they realized what I had done. I'd trapped them. Accept my offer, I commanded in a feeble voice. If I die, you won't be free. Then die, the demons snarled. Bloodsakes have always been lured to the mountains. The next will be no different. We will find their weakness and use it against them. That strategy has led you to wait for 1,000 years, I reminded them. No blood sake will be willing to free you as I am. Without Bander to lead you, you'll be trapped here at least another 1,000 years. Why? They demanded. Why free us? I thought of Crommelin, of how he had defended his demon brothers on Lapser even after they had betrayed him. I thought of the mirror of truth, which had inexplicably shown me a memory of Rikama when I'd asked how to defeat the demons. And I knew this was the right way. Even chaos has its place, I replied. Without you, Kiata has been out of balance. Before I lost my courage, I drew a deep breath and went on. The future I wish for is a Kyoto where magic springs once more from the earth and flourishes, a Kyoto where demons and gods and mortals live and thrive together. You have served your time. Now promise that you shall not harm the spirit, soul, or body of any living being in Kyoto. Promise it, and I will give you my blood. I swear it. The demons said nothing. Their silence stretched an eternity as their hollow eyes bored into mine. I was certain that I'd die before they made up their minds. Then, finally, they spoke in an eerie chorus that made the mountains tremble. For 1,000 years, we have been confined within these hollow walls. No more, they murmured. We will swear. We will all swear. We swear it now. The birds obeyed and flew, carrying my blood to lift the demon's shackles. As each demon was released, it passed me the barest nod, its face inscrutable. This was what I'd been born for, to bring magic back to Kyoto, to undo what my ancestors had done. It was written into my fate, in the strands of magic in my soul, and in my blood that connected me to the demons. Soon it would be done. When all the demons had been freed, their chains evaporated in puffs of smoke. But they could not leave yet. My birds soared above the demons and touched their paper wings to one another in a circle. The strands of my soul wove together in one long beam of silver and gold, and my birds formed a ring around the demons, binding them to their promise. Finally, it was done. A long shudder shook the earth, and the breach ruptured, its scarlet light flashing. Cracks formed across the mountain wall, fierce gusts of wind punching through. Go, the winds seemed to cry. You are no longer prisoners here. The demons needed no invitation. Out into the world they flew, emptying the mountain and taking my paper birds with them. With each one that left, my soul unraveled a thread, and I could feel myself grow lighter. Too light to remain on this earth. Before long, only Kiki remained, and as the glow of the moon touched her wings, she alit on my shoulder one last time. Now it's my turn, she said. I was so wanting to stay with you until the end and see where in the 9 heavens Lord Shuriman would put us. That is, if you end up in heaven. No, I whispered. I caught her by the wing, bringing her to my face. No, you're staying with me. I can't, said Kiki, the silver gold patterns on her wings fading. I started to protest, tears welling in my eyes, but Kiki sounded braver than she ever had. At least I can say I lived an exciting life for a paper bird. I wish Radish Boy were here to sing, or your brother with his flute. I'd like to hear some music before I go. I brought her close. Shinari was a girl who lived by the sea, I began, my voice hoarse and crackly, who kept the fire with a spoon and pot. Stir, stir, a soup for lovely skin. Simmer, simmer, a stew for thick black hair. But what did she make for a happy smile? Cakes, cakes, too cruel was the wind. Before I could finish the song, it stole my little paper bird away, ensnaring her in a powerful gale. Kiki. I pitched after her, but her body had gone stiff and lifeless. A sob tore out of me as the wind carried her out of sight. Kiki, I whispered. The mountain was still trembling, and I dragged myself to the breach. The last of the demons were departing, each one that passed through the breach making the scarlet light flicker and fade, its edges turning gray like the rest of the wall. The magic of the mountains was returning to Kiata, as was my own magic. Eternal courts, I cursed, noticing how narrow the breach had become. Minutes ago, it had been as high and wide as a tree, and now it was barely a head taller than I. It was closing. I pressed against the still glowing rocks, trying to push my way through. In panic, I dug at a fissure between the rocks, dirt and sand spilling between my fingers as the mountain quaked. More wind pierced through, and I could hear birds outside. But I was no demon, and I had no magic left. I could not pass. Shirori, called a voice. Takan? I looked into the fissure and saw a blue tassel swinging from Takan's belt, then his hand clinging to a narrow ledge on the mountainside. My heart leapt. Takan! He'd found me. He peered through the crack, his eyes shining with hope. Shirori, I'm going to get you out. His face disappeared from view, replaced by the sound of his sword scraping against the crack, trying to make it bigger. I didn't know whether to curse or cry out in joy. Of all the persistent, stubborn, stupid young men, get out of here, you fool, I croaked, but Takan still dug, even as the mountain rumbled. Enough. The breach is closing. You can't save me. I am the end of your string, Takan reminded me. No matter how long it stretches, so long as you want me, I will never let go. The knots in my chest tightened, and tears heated the corners of my eyes. I wanted to hear Takan sing to our children one day, to climb Rabbit Mountain every spring and view the moon at its peak. I wanted to read the book of tales he was writing for Megari, to set lanterns afloat on the Bayun River with him every year during Iroh's winter festival, to see our hair turn white with age, but our hearts remain young with stories and laughter. Move aside. Takan shouted as he sent an arrow through the hole, a long thread dangling from its shaft. Rikama's thread. My stepmother had used it to pull me out of the holy mountains once, and now Takan meant to do the same. I wasn't sure whether it would work again, but it shimmered with magic as I grasped its end, and that gave me hope. With a shaky breath, I tied it around my wrist. Give a tug when you're ready, Takan yelled. I inched as close as I could to the rock. Then, before I lost my chance, I tugged. There came a strong pull from outside. Rock scraped against my shoulders and dust filled my nose and mouth. I closed my eyes, half thinking that I would slam against the mountain and die. But by my next breath, I was outside. A pair of strong arms caught me by the waist. The sun was still buried by clouds and smog, but in the reddish afterglow of the breach, I saw the joy on Takan's face dissolve once he saw me. Blood soaked my robes, and my body was soft, almost limp. I was practically a ghost, clinging to life by a single strand of my soul. So far gone I could barely feel the pain. It's done, I whispered. The demons are free. Magic is free. I tucked my head under his chin to savor his heat and to avoid my reflection in his misty eyes. Now take me home. Please. His arms still around my waist, Takan lowered a step by careful step to the mountain's base, and I glanced one last time at the breach. It was but a spark, like a last glimmer of day before evenfall. Then it vanished. The mountains ceased their trembling. The earth went still once more. and the sun slipped out of a pocket of smoke, gold and radiant as a coin, reminding us that it had been there all along. Chapter 46. Rain loosened from the clouds, dousing the last of the demon fire. It slid down my cheeks, cool and wet, and washed away the rime of ash on my skin. Beside me, rain filled up the tears of Emirian once more, and as the moon orchid floated to the top of the pool, its soft petals impossibly blooming, I knew that the battles I'd fought had not been in vain. Magic had returned to Kyoto. I could feel it like a song resonating around me, making the world feel more alive. "It's back," I whispered to Takan. "It's in the air, the earth, everywhere. It's wonderful." As the rain eased, I blinked at the sky. It was a beautiful, blue as a pea flower day. "Let's wait here, just for a minute," I said. With a nod, Takan stopped. Muscles corded his arms as he painstakingly lay me down, every movement with the greatest care, on a flat rock before the tears of Emirian. The smoke was gone, and in its place was a soft fog curling up from the trees as rain tickled the earth. The fog skimmed over Takan's face, almost hiding the mist in his eyes. He knew he couldn't save me. My life literally hung on a thread, on one last piece of my soul that I had kept to myself. All we had left was goodbye. Rain splashed against my face, but I couldn't feel the droplets anymore. I was already drifting, like a kite cut loose, the end of my string only grasping at the earth. Soon it too would float away. I saw a figure in the far distance, advancing slowly. It was not someone I had met before, yet his very presence cast forth a heavy, inescapable pall, like the weight of the ocean pressing down on my body. My heart sank in my chest. I had a feeling I knew who it was. I turned to Takan, seizing what moments I had left. "Tell me a story." His dark hair obscured his eyes, and I couldn't tell whether it was rain or tears that tracked down the hard slope of his cheeks. His hands cradled mine. "There once was a girl who'd forgotten how to smile," he said softly. "She was clever and beautiful, so much so that word of her loveliness had spread from village to village, and she had many admirers. But when her mother fell ill, all the happiness fled from her eyes, and she became a ghost of her former self. Before her mother died, she made the girl promise to wear a wooden bowl over her head and never take it off. It would cover half her face and shield her from unwanted attention. Soon word spread that she was hiding demon eyes beneath the bowl, but she ignored the cruel words that followed her. It made her see who her true friends were, just as her mother had wished. After many months, she met a boy who noticed not the bowl but her sadness. He made it his mission to earn a smile from her. Every day he would walk with her in the garden and tell her stories. Slowly, ever so slowly, the girl warmed to his gentle heart, and the two fell in love. "He sounds like you," I said, tilting my head back. "A simple, humble lord of the third rank. One who likes to run when it's snowing and paint storybooks for his sister." The boy wished to marry her, Takan continued, but the villagers would not permit it. Thinking her a demon, they tried to kill her. Only her bowl shattered into 1,000 pieces, revealing at last her eyes, which twinkled not with malevolent power, but the light of the stars. The boy saw not her beauty, but the woman he loved. He married her as soon as she would have him, and their strands were knotted from one life to the next and the next. I smiled ruefully, almost forgetting the pain, almost forgetting the strange presence that had been hovering in my periphery, waiting for Tak Kan to finish his tale. I like the ending to your story, I whispered. I wish it were how ours ended. Takan lowered his eyes. They were wet as he pressed his hand into mine, and his voice was husky with emotion. We are bound, remember? If you have no heart, I will give you half of mine. If you have no spirit, I will bind yours to mine. Find the light that makes your lantern shine, I said softly, quoting Rikema. Hold on to it, even when the dark surrounds you. Not even the strongest wind will blow out the flame. I tilted my head to look up at him. You will be the light, Takan. No matter where I go. My vision blurred, and my ears rang, robbing me of Takan's reply. But at last I could see the figure that encroached upon my final moments. He came not cloaked in velvety darkness, as I'd expected, but swathed in a stinging bright light. Lord Shuriman himself, the god of death. Come, Shiorionma, he said, his voice cool and detached. It is time. I sensed my spirit obeying the god of death and beginning to leave my body. Sleep dusted my eyelids, yet I fought to stay awake. I fought to stay. No, not yet. You have done well, said the god, his words edged with warning. Go with dignity. I don't care. Let me stay. Please. It was useless to plead with Sharima and the Undertaker. Every Kia'en knew that. But I didn't care how childish I sounded. My father, my brothers, they need me. I swallowed. And Takan. They'll join you when their time comes, said Lord Shuriman. Now it is yours. Is it? Chimed a new voice. The god of death turned, frowning at the shimmering form that had appeared behind him. Weakly, I lifted my head. Bathed in a crown of moonlight was the Lady of the Moon. Rabbits with silver-rimmed eyes frolicked at her feet, and she glided to us on a pale cloud. Emirinia, I thought. Look, she spoke, gesturing at me. Her voice was warm and melodious, new to me yet oddly familiar at the same time. They are bound by a Murian strand. I glanced down at my wrist and saw that it was looped in a luminous thread, tying me to Takan. I'd seen it once before, when Rikema lay dying. Threads are easily severed, said Lord Shuriman. Return home to your rabbits, sister. You have no place here. Indeed, it is not my place, Emirinia admitted, but I also bring word from Ai Long. From the Prince of the Four Supreme Seas, heir to the Dragon King. My ears perked. His heir? What do the dragons want? Lord Shuriman said testily. They've never intervened in human dealings before. His Eternal Highness Sariaginan reminds us that we required the dragon's aid in sealing the demons into the mountains long ago. They are owed a favor, and they demand a voice in the fate of the blood sake who has released them. The Lady of the Moon then paused, and placing weight on each word, she said, "The dragons wish her to live." Displeasure darkened Lord Shuriman's expression, and brother and sister said nothing, at least, nothing I could hear. I sensed they were speaking, arguing, to be precise, in the tongue of the gods. At last, the god of death stepped back, leaving Imurinia to address me. She knelt at my side, stroking my temples. My spirit quavered at her touch, still clinging to my body by just a thread. "You have demonstrated great fortitude," she said gravely, "and you have pleased the gods with your deeds on this earth. We are not without mercy." I held my breath, not knowing what mercy to expect. "The Lord of Death and I have come to an agreement," she said. "We have decided that half is fair. Half is more than most receive." "Half?" I echoed. "Yes, half." Imurinia's luminous eyes rested on me. "Shiorion Ma, your soul ebbs between life and death, half bound to Bushian Takan and half to the heavens. Thus, for the remainder of your lifetime, you will spend half of each year on the moon with me." Kiki fluttered from behind the lady's robes, and if I could have leapt to my feet, I would have. She turned into a real bird, with feathers instead of paper wings and round, unblinking eyes instead of the inked ones I'd made. Gold trimmed her wings, and a vibrant red crown painted her head. She found her way to me, explained Imurinia with a smile. "Will you come?" Kiki asked, cheeky as ever. "You look awful. Come with us." I lingered. I wasn't ready. "The other half of the year, I will spend it on the earth?" I asked. My voice was heady. I couldn't tell whether I'd spoken the words aloud. "It is a compromise, my brother, and I have agreed upon," said Imurinia. "So long as Bushian Takan lives, so too will this agreement. When his time comes, you will join him in Lord Shuriman's realm." I glanced at the Lord of Death, who gave an imperceptible nod. Then I looked at Takan, wondering whether he could hear or see the immortals. He was still at my side, his eyes bleary and raw. "That sounds fair enough," I agreed quietly. "When may I return?" "You will return each spring and summer." "And I'll be normal?" I asked, swallowing. "Human?" Imurinia chuckled. Yes. Human enough to bleed and heal, to age and grow in happiness and wisdom. Even to bear children, should you wish." An intense flush heated my cheeks, but Imurinia must have read my mind, for that was exactly what I wished to know. Could I return for the winter and the spring instead? I asked, knowing it was uncouth to bargain with the gods, but unable to help myself. "I should like to celebrate my birthday with my family and see the winter cranes." "And Iroh," I added. "It's most beautiful in the winter." Imurinia disarmed me with her bright gaze, so intent that my heart skipped. I felt certain that I had erred, and that she and Lord Shuriman would take away the compromise altogether. "Very well," said Imurinia at last. "Winter and spring, it is decided. But for this first cycle, you must wait for spring. Winter approaches, and your body needs to heal." She lifted one of the rabbits at her feet, and divine light pooled around us, piercing into the mortal realm. Takan drew a sharp breath. Now he could see her. "The pledge is made," Imurinia informed him. "Shiorion Ma will rejoin the earth every winter and spring, spending half the year with you and half with me. Come the first moonrise of spring, you will find her on Rabbit Mountain, Bushian Takan." Takan blinked, the only sign of surprise he let slip at the sight of the great immortals. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve and bowed his head low. I understand, he said quietly. Thank you, Lady Amurinia. I will be there. Now say your farewells, said the Lady of the Moon. Piece by piece, my spirit reassembled within my body, a tingling sensation flooding every nerve. I lifted my head first as a test. Then, as the rest of me awoke, I gave Takken a dimpled grin. That was all it took to erase the sorrow from his face. His eyes went wide with wonder and relief. Help me up, I said, and Takken's hand was there in an instant, pulling me gently to my feet. I saw now that we were no longer alone. My brothers had come, and they hurried forward. At least you won't have to sew when you're on the moon, Jotun teased. Or will you? I doubt the lady would want me ruining her tapestries, I replied. True, true. I embraced the twins, then moved on to Reiji. Like me, he would be leaving Kyoto soon. We hadn't gotten along particularly well during our childhood, and I thought I'd be at a loss for words. Not today. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'll miss you, Reiji. You shouldn't, he said mildly. No one else will put cicada husks under your pillow or dare you to steal snakes from Raikuma's garden. You'll find yourself in a lot less trouble. So, at last you admit this whole thing was your fault? He gave a lopsided grin. We share equal blame. I threw my arms around him, wishing I'd hugged him more when we were younger. This isn't goodbye forever, I said into his ear. I know you'll find a way to charm your paper princess into a visit when I'm back. Then came Hasho, his wing folded at his side. I'm glad you asked for winter. Your birthday wouldn't be the same without you. I hugged my youngest brother. He had always understood me best. We'll have a feast ready for you when you return, sister, said Bankai. A banquet with all the best dishes and a sky full of lanterns. I laughed. I'm the one who's supposed to cook for you all. You will. And Hai winked. Had I ever seen him wink? We'll make a list of our favorite dishes. I whirled to him, realizing. I'll be an aunt when I return. And hopefully I'll have a new brother, replied Aunt Hai. He inclined a nod at Takan. Don't forget, you still have a wedding to prepare for. Maybe the two of you should wed now, lest you get a notion to stay on the moon for good. I won't. I exchanged a shy smile with Takan. His heart is my home, and where yours is where I belong, he said together with me. He looked down at our wrists, the red strands still visible, their ends knotted. I'll be waiting for you. His words were all the music I needed to hear, and I blew a kiss as I followed Kiki and Lady Amurinia on a path of moonlight into the oldest legend I knew. Epilogue. I stood on the brink of the moon, a sea of twilight welling beneath my feet, stars hanging above and below. Though my vantage point was a glorious one, tonight I felt no awe, only eagerness. I'd waited 6 months for this. I wouldn't waste a second. I'm ready, I whispered. A trail of silvery moonlight appeared, unspooling over the star-touched folds of heaven. Down and down it led, among fields of clouds soft as freshly fallen snow. I moved quickly, unable to match the pace of my racing heart. Or Kiki, whose new wings had made her remarkably swift. As she waited for me to catch up, she made a game of threading between the beams of light that shot after us. Hurry up, you snail, she cried. Spring will be over by the time you make it down to earth. I'll never get my cakes. I hurried, smiling wistfully. Kiki adored being a real crane, and she never spoke of her papery past anymore. But sometimes, when she was frightened or lonely, she would still try to fly into my sleeve, forgetting that she was too big. That was how I knew she missed her original form, at least a little. Together we coasted down the moonlit path until a breeze shot forth, cutting through the stillness of the heavens. Emurinia had told us that the sons of the wind guarded the divide between the immortal and mortal realms. This was where Kiki and I would part. "Remember to bring back cakes," she said, making me promise for the 100th time. The round rice ones with red bean paste. Mooncakes, too. Emurinia would like that. "I'll remember," I said, pressing a kiss on my little bird's head. "Don't cause any mischief for the lady when I'm away." Kiki disappeared behind a curtain of moonlight, leaving me alone with the sun and clouds. I had come to the end of the path, but Emurinia hadn't told me what to do from here. I bent down, my fingertips caressing a low cloud as it skimmed my ankles. Below, the sun illuminated the world, and I had the view of the gods. In the south, I spied Jen poring over a trove of books, the mirror of truth glimmering at his side. Then across the Taijin Sea, I caught a glimpse of Saria racing a pod of whales. His horns had grown into a magnificent silvery crown, and his eyes glowed redder than the sun. The Dragon King's heir, I remembered. I wondered how he had managed that. He must have sensed me watching, for he tipped his head up and looked straight at me, straight at the moon. For the barest moment, our gazes met, and Saria gave me an enigmatic smile. Then, without missing a beat, he dove back into the sea, roaring past the whales who'd only just caught up with him. I clapped, letting out a laugh and watching them disappear beyond the horizon. Then, directly below my feet, the clouds shifted to reveal a familiar two-peaked mountain. I almost didn't recognize it without its usual dusting of snow, but suddenly my heart was beating so fast I could hardly breathe. And suddenly I knew what to do. I leapt. I don't know if I fell or flew. The clouds obscured my view, and the world rushed up in a whirl of stars and light. But then I landed, my back sinking into the soft contours of earth, and when I felt the sun upon my cheeks, I opened my eyes. I was lying on grass. Cold, wet grass that pricked my elbows and knees. Shallow pools of mud flanked me, and silvery veins of frost laced the field. A cloak fell over my shoulders an instant before I was going to shiver. "Careful of the mud, Moon Maid," Takkin said softly, kneeling beside me. "It's near frozen. Won't be fun to fall in." He lifted me safely from where I lay, enveloping me in his warmth, and I touched my forehead to his. My voice came out husky, a mix of joy and disbelief. "Your first words to me are of mud?" Takkin grinned. I thought the warning more urgent than a welcoming serenade. "Consider me warned. Now sing." "Now? You'll laugh." "I'd never laugh at you, Bashin Takan." I said it as solemnly as I could, but my eyes were dancing and Takan knew me. Liar. As punishment, he hiked me higher in his arms. I squealed with surprise and delight as he spun me around and around, his boots sloshing into the mud. We laughed until our stomachs hurt, the sound of our happiness harmonizing in a song that made my heart feel as full as the pale sun behind the clouds. When at last he set me down, both of us were so dizzy we stumbled over each other. He caught me by the waist and kissed me. It was a kiss worth waiting for, whether half a year or half a lifetime, a kiss that made my breath catch and my stomach swoop, and the frost that coated my nose and eyelashes melt with delicious warmth. I ran my fingers through his hair and pulled him close, tickling his nose with mine and watching our breath steam into the air. I licked my lips, tasting sugar. Cakes? Charuin made them for you, confessed Takan with a sheepish grin. I tested a few to make sure they were acceptable. Do you want one? Cakes over flowers, I'd told him. As my heart squeezed with warmth, the tiniest buds flowered under my feet. Only a thread of magic was left inside me, but Kiata bloomed with it. The way it felt to me was like a layer of love tucked deep inside one's belly. Warmth, even when it was cold. Joy, even when there was sadness. The flowers under my feet blossomed and grew. Later, I replied, finally answering Takan's question. I wrapped his arms around my waist and leaned back against him, feeling his breath stir my hair. We only have a few minutes till sundown. I could have stayed in his arms all day, content with my view of the rice fields below, the Bayun River curving down Rabbit Mountain into the grassy knolls surrounding Iro, the gray-tiled castle in the near distance. But the day was fading, the gilded earth turning silvery with young moonlight. Not to mention, we weren't actually alone. A high-pitched giggle gave away the intruder, and I whirled to glance over Takan's shoulder. Megari, I squealed. Takan told me to give you a song's worth of time alone, said Megari, setting down an unlit lantern. In the year I'd been away, she'd lost some of the youthful roundness to her cheeks, but a familiar glint of mischief sparkled in her eyes. I chose a short song. I scooped her into a hug, spinning her once before setting her down. I marveled at her. She was nearly to my shoulder now, and she no longer wore her hair in pigtails, but loose against her back. Don't comment on how much I've grown, and I won't comment on your hair, Megari warned before I could get a word in. You're going to get lots of remarks on it. Trust me. Father and Takan wouldn't stop staring at me when they got home. As if they'd been away for years, not months. My sister is beginning to prefer the company of rabbits to humans, joked Takan. A pair of fluffy beasts gamboled over my feet, one brown-spotted rabbit even daring to nibble on my slippers. I knelt to stroke its velvety fur. They're usually afraid of strangers, mused Megari. But not you. There are many rabbits on the moon, I replied, letting the creature go. I watched it caper off into the tall grass. I could feel Megari burning with questions for me, but Takan touched his sister's shoulder, as if reminding her of some unspoken agreement. With a sigh, she picked up her lantern, swinging it as she sauntered toward the base of the hill where they had tethered the horses. Enjoy this time alone. Once you reach home, Mama's not going to give you a moment's rest. Careful riding home, Takan called after Megari. It's getting dark. Megari waved to show she'd heard, then once more in farewell. I waved back, watching her recede into Iro. Then my eyes drifted up to the sky, where the fading sun was changing places with a rising moon. A sea of stars glimmered through the gauzy dusk, the seven-pointed crane already brighter than the rest. "They've renamed it," said Takan, sensing what had caught my attention after a new legend. "What legend?" "It's a legend of cranes and demons and dragons, and a princess under a terrible curse." The children are riveted. He silenced whatever I was going to say by taking my hand and pressing a kiss to my palm. "It's a decent story, but long. I'll tell you later. Tonight we have guests." Guests on the same day as my long-awaited arrival? Who could be so important? He knew I was frothing with anticipation. "Did I tell you we have a little demon in the kitchen now? It came a few weeks ago, and it's burrowed itself into the stove. It burns the rice and makes the fire go out when it's in a temper. The cooks are nettled, but Megari likes it. I think it's growing on Chiruin too." I put my hands on my hips. Demons could wait. "Who's the guest?" "Guests." Takan paused deliberately, enjoying my impatience. "It's your brothers." "My brothers?" A huge smile sprang to my face. "They've come?" "All 6 of them," Takan confirmed. "Even Reiji from Alandi. And your father." At that, both my eyebrows rose. Takan laughed. That was my reaction too. You can imagine my mother's distress when she got word of his visit. She spent the last week trying to get the household in perfect order. And she still hasn't quite gotten over the fact that she hosted you an entire winter without knowing your true identity. Does that mean she won't let me back in the kitchen? Probably not. For at least a year, I'd say. A year? I lamented. I missed cooking, and from the way my stomach growled right then, I missed eating too. Well, I have 6 brothers for a reason. Let's hope she'll be more preoccupied with them than me. I doubt it. She does have her son's wedding to prepare for. I blushed, tongue-tied for once. Then I said, Megari was right, wasn't she? It's going to be pandemonium when I get back. Everyone will be staring and asking questions. We can be a little late, said Takan. A little late. Did I hear correctly? My honorable, upstanding betrothed suggests we arrive late to dinner. I pretended to gasp in horror. With the emperor, no less. A smile tugged at Takan's lips. For you, I'm willing to bend a few rules. I couldn't help it. I leapt up, but Takan was already there. His lips found mine and we locked together, his hands holding me by the small of my back as I wrapped my arms around his neck and raked my fingers through his hair. We kissed and kissed, staggering until we fell back against a tree and laughed and shrieked as snow tumbled off the branches onto our heads. I'd never know how long we spent holding each other against the tree, rabbits watching us curiously. All too soon, the dusk aged and night fell upon us. It was time to go back. We should get going, Takan said, dusting snowflakes from my nose before he led me away from the tree. He didn't let go of my hand as he knelt, retrieving the 2 lanterns he'd brought. A blue one for himself and a red one for me, tied together by a simple red thread. So I don't lose you in the dark, he explained when I traced the thread with my fingers. You'll never lose me, Bashin Takan, I replied. Be it bright or dark, you're the light that makes my lantern shine. Under the shining moon, we made our way home, our hearts beaming, and the light in our lanterns as radiant as the stars.